of these five that we're talking about today, Chris, who I was unable to find some highlights. I know they're out there. I just didn't find them yet. So what I need to know about Justin Connor?
Well, I was honestly anxious about these five because these are different kids than what people would expect. Justin Connor, Matt, he's been all over the map in recruiting. You know, at one point, he was a pretty much consensus top 100 in the nation guy. And then last year, I don't know how many people know this, he was injured a lot, had issues there. I tried to see him play twice, and he didn't play those nights to give you an indication, so I didn't get any pictures of him. Haven't seen him play in person. Okay. But last year's season bumped him down. I had 24/7 Sports dropped him down to, I think, around 30 in Mississippi at one point. And then they bumped him back up to around 15 or so. You know, I've heard the guy, he's kin to Tony Connor. I've heard he's a fantastic athlete. I've seen film on him, so I can attest to it on film. He's fast, especially his sophomore year. Agile, and he's super, super quick. Whenever he goes to the combine, and it happened again this summer, heading into his senior year, he wows people. But like I said, he was injured a lot last year. He still almost rushed for 1,000. Despite that, he averaged 7.5 yards a carry. Now, I think he'll have a solid college career, but he definitely needs a big season.
So that's running back from North Panola at number 15 on the list, and that is Justin Connor, number 14 on the list. We go down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. A junior, Tim Jones. You better be good as a junior, especially at a skill position spot, to jump into this top 25 players. Biloxi's Tim Jones, Chris.
Well, look, I'm sticking my neck out with this kid a little bit. I've heard a lot about him. I haven't seen him in person. There's not a lot of recruiting information on him because he hasn't really gotten himself out there a lot. And I don't have a combine where there's a registered 40 time. If he shows up at that combine and he runs a 4.7, he's going to get knocked down. But, guys, as a sophomore last year, he caught 100 balls. He started as a freshman, too. But he caught 100 passes last year, under 1,400 yards. He only played 11 games. He had 15 touchdowns. Matt, I know you called the game, or I know you were at the 6A state championship game last year. He had 230 yards against Oak Grove during the regular season, and that was a team that was loaded with skill people. Caught 14 passes against them. Everybody I talk to say this kid is terrific. He's 6'1", a couple hundred pounds. I've had people tell me 6'2", 200. You know, he has had a monster career so far. I think he's one of these guys, as soon as he gets out there a little more, you'll see his recruitment start to blow up.
You know what? And the numbers don't lie. And the tape doesn't either. I mean, the kid is so productive, and that's the thing. You said it, all right? You get some combine numbers and a 40 time here or there, and maybe then it's another layer of information on a player like this. But when I look up and see those numbers as a sophomore, 100 receptions, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. You know, you put a note in there, too, over at supertalk.fm/super25 on him that they played Fort Walton Beach, Florida. A really good program. The kid had 18 catches in the game for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't care. Anybody that's putting up those kind of numbers as a sophomore, Chris, I have no problem with you putting him in the top 15.
Well, I kept moving him up. The more people I talked to, so a lot of this is word of mouth from what people tell me. But I'm anxious to get down there and see him in person.
There you go. Number
13 on the list. His size jumps out at me when you match it up with a position. Draylon Porter from South Panola, 6'4", 200 pounds at the defensive end spot. Chris, you say that he's got offers from Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Memphis, and others. Is he a defensive end a year from now?
You hear a lot about him as a linebacker. Okay.
Yep.
I had him higher than just about every recruiting service. He's 10th among seniors whenever I put him on this list. And I'll tell you why. The only thing I've ever heard negative about him is the weight. Like nothing else. He's tall, he's lanky, he's got the chance to get bigger. He's 6'4", but if you see him, he's very wiry. But he's a terrific athlete. I mean, he's run 4.5 in 2 different combines that I've been to. He looks great in any type of drill work. And when I saw him in person last year, I saw him twice, juniors or seniors, he was about as good defensively as anybody I saw. He lived in the backfield. South Panola is one of the names in Mississippi, and it's big-time football. It's 6A competition. He was their best defensive player. He had 20 tackles for loss. He just has to get bigger. His most recent combine, I called to check up and see what he checked in at. I was hoping they'd say 210, 215, but he's 200 pounds. But I think the kid could really do something if he, if you remember, I'm not going to say he's this kid, but Bernard McKinney was 200 pounds whenever he was in high school at Rosa Ford. He's about 6'4". These are different players.
KJ Wright out of Olive Branch the same way. And you know what I think? Look, if you're 6'4", and you played defense at South Panola, and you can run a 4.5, and you had 20 tackles for a loss, you can name your position. If somebody wants him to be an outside linebacker, he's prototypical outside linebacker in some defense that they use a bunch of different looks, including a 3-4. And if he wants to put on 25, 30 pounds and be like Marquise Haynes is over at Ole Miss, I think he's got that kind of potential also.
I think he could, Matt. And I've read, and I have not spent a lot of time around him, but from people that are around him, I've heard he's open in his recruitment. He's not one of these guys that's just hardcore going to go to Ole Miss. He's open-minded. He's talked about Mississippi State, so I think he could end up either place. But he's one of these guys I really think if he can go put on another 25 or 30 pounds, you'll look back and you'll wonder why he wasn't more highly ranked.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is, second day in a row that this guy's name's been mentioned, Isaac Gross has kind of shattered some of those thoughts about you've got to be a certain size to play a certain position. He's played defensive tackle undersized for 3 years and kind of wreaked havoc. It may be one of those South Panola things. I don't know. When you talk about a guy that just doesn't quite fit the mold, or Matt, what is it you've talked about with Nick Saban before, that slot system where you've got to be certain size, certain height.
He may not fit the slot, for Nick Saban, but he can play for somebody. I promise you that. One guy who does fit the slot, though, is the player, Chris, at number 12, Marquise Spencer from Greenwood. Did I read some stuff right that says he's 6'5", 235, and runs a 4.5 in the 40?
Yeah, and that's legit. He's a late addition to this list because he was a junior. And then he's been able to take enough classes and just pass enough classes where he's officially now a senior. So everybody's coming on him now. I mean, the recruitment is kind of late. But he's 6'5", 235. He ran the 4.58 at Mississippi State camp recently. He's a big Mississippi State kid if you follow him at all. So I think he'll end up there. 148 tackles last year. They list him with 32 tackles for loss and 23 sacks. I saw him at a 7-on-7, and the 4.58 did catch my attention, but I saw him there play some tight end and run around playing linebacker with some smaller receivers. I can attest that kid can flat out run, and he's physically impressive in person.
In his highlights, he's the tallest guy on that line of scrimmage, and he does a little bit in his highlights. He looks a little bit like Dickens at Holmes County in that he's got these really long arms and he just keeps people off of him and goes and makes tackles. But, I didn't see any arm tackles with him. That's another good sign for a guy. It's a high school defensive end. You didn't see very many arm tackles. He's sticking his nose in there and hitting people hard.
Yeah, look, and honestly, even at 12, the ranking we have him, I threw him in there at that spot because a lot of people don't know a lot about him. He's really not even in the rankings for most of the services. He could end up a lot higher than this because the kid's just a freak athlete.
Yeah.
Well, and then another great body type, Scott Lashley, the offensive lineman from West Point, 6'6", 295 pounds. I mentioned earlier he's got a laundry list of offers. And you want to talk about a frame that just absolutely has offensive line coaches around the SEC drooling. He's got it.
Just pure physical body, that sort of stuff, he could be a top 5 kid easy. To give you the best thing I could say about this kid, I saw them play last year early. And you notice he's out there, but he didn't really do a whole lot. And then late in the year, you see this film on him where he's destroying people. And come to find out, he hasn't played much football. This will really be the first year he's been exclusively the offensive tackle for West Point. He's a late bloomer kind of guy, just a raw athlete you throw out there. But from when I saw him early in the year, and then you see what he became by the end of the year, and then you give him a whole summer and then a senior year to kind of show out. Look, he's 6'6", 295, and those numbers aren't inflated if you stand next to the kid. He's every bit of it. He can run, and if you watch his film, a lot of that's from late in the year where they did play him some at tackle. You'll see him at tight end on some of the film because they moved him around while he's kind of learning what he's doing. But this kid's going to have a big-time career.
It's easier to name the schools that haven't offered him in the Big Five conferences right now than the ones that have because just about everybody has. Chris, on his tape, I wrote down the word pancake because I don't know if I've ever watched a high school offensive lineman film where there are more plays just back to back to back to back, 10 to 15 plays just over and over on his tape of not only blocking guys, but blocking them to the ground. I'm talking driving the back of their shoulder pads into the dirt. I don't think I've seen a tape like that anytime that I can remember.
And the best thing about him, considering that, Matt, is a lot of that's just instinct. Because, like I said, he hasn't played much. When you talk to recruiting guys, they're looking for red flags and they're trying to find any bad thing about a recruit. And with him, it's a lot of they didn't even really see him early in the year, and then you come to find out he just hadn't played a lot. And then you see what he did by the end of the year. I'm with you. You watch his film, and for somebody to improve that much over the course of a season, and to learn that fast, and then we'll see what he does as a senior. Somebody would be lucky to get that kid.
Chris, tomorrow we climb into the top 10. Matt and I will be joining you from the Slugburger Festival in Corinth, but we're still talking high school football right out of the gate tomorrow.
Nice. Y'all have fun.